I have just gone live. I still need to tweet out that I'm going live, but this is going to be the campaign Skyjacks Q&A, and looks like I just saw myself go live on Twitch, so we're doing this. Let me know if the audio is okay. This is one of my first times that I am doing this here. Normally I do stuff out of the studio, and when I stream video games from home, I'm doing them usually directly through my PlayStation. So give me a second. Liz is pestering me for links. I am going to, for the first part of this, just be answering questions alone, but eventually I'm going to be joined by at least Liz, and maybe some of the other folks from campaign. So give me a second. There are a bunch of questions that really only I could answer, and I didn't want people sitting around not being able to contribute. So anyway, I'm going to make these tweets, and then I'm going to start in on it. Names equipped. It is very nice to see you in the chat. Okay, I should really be filling the time here. It's just hard for me to concentrate on typing and talking at the same time. Which not being able to talk and do something with an electronic device at the same time is actually not great for a streamer. I should get better at that. Okay, I have tweeted it from my account. Now I just got to go over to the campaign account and retweet that. Done. And go over to the network account and retweet it. Okay, retweeted from those accounts. Hey, yeah, it is me. Sorry, I'm still getting things in order here. I didn't want to tweet everything was ready to go and then have some sort of technical issue that prevented the stream from launching, because that's happened to me before. Now I just got to tell Liz that I will send her a link at 7:45. Okay, cool. So all of that is out of the way. Hi, everyone. Thank you so much for joining me on this. I'm really, really excited to talk about Skyjacks. I do want to point out before we go any further that this was originally going to be a Woman with Hollow Eyes preview stream. Our Kickstarter for that is still up, but it is so terribly cold here in Chicago that I could not morally ask people to go out to the studio in this cold. In 5 minutes you can start getting frostbite. That's how bad it is here. So we have decided that really all we need to do tonight is just have something up here. If you enjoy campaign, I think there's a good chance you'll enjoy A Woman with Hollow Eyes. So go check out that Kickstarter page, click around and see if it's something that you'll like. And if you do, please consider supporting us because we've already made our funding goal. So the show is going to happen, but most of that money just goes directly towards the performers and, helps us pay them more of what they're worth. Anyway, I am here tonight to answer questions about campaign Skyjacks, which I guess I would think everybody who's in the chat would know about, but in case you aren't aware, Skyjacks is a folktale punk fantasy series that we do as an ongoing campaign on our campaign podcast feed. It's about sky pirates, and it's got a core anti-colonial narrative, and we're going to be exploring what that means, and a lot of that as I go through these questions. But essentially, it follows a group of 4 pirates who are aboard a ship called the Uhuru. And they are definitely on the wrong side of the law. They're trying to avoid various civic authorities, even though there are no kingdoms in this setting per se. There are definitely people who control the skies or control certain parts of the skies, and our crew, the Uhuru, is not welcome there. So they go around the law and try to make a life together, and each of them has various magical secrets. We put a lot of work into this production. I'm working with some of the most talented people that I know, and I feel so grateful for the opportunity to do that. Skyjacks is not just a narrative podcast, but it's also scored, and there's soundscape editing thanks to our editor, Casey Toney. The score comes from Arnie Parrott, who is a tremendous composer and musician who he's contributed so much to the show. Anyway, if you are interested at all in Skyjacks, I recommend heading over to wherever you get podcasts, likely a podcast app, or you can go directly to our website at oneshotpodcast.com and look at our actual play pieces. And there is Campaign Skyjacks, and you'll be able to stream it from the site or download it to your podcatcher of choice. With that, I had the great fortune of getting asked a lot of really fascinating questions. So I am going to be talking about those questions here to you. I'll mention, who asked me each question, and I'll answer it to the best of my abilities. I am going to do my best to avoid putting forth any spoilers for the show, as we're only 9 episodes in on Skyjacks right now. We're still laying a lot of the groundwork. When I talk to people about the show, I usually mention that we haven't even really started yet, because there's a lot of information that I want to give the audience that I think the audience needs for us to really dig into the meat of storytelling, of figuring out, what's going on with these characters and what drives them and what makes their lives interesting. And there's not enough information about the setting yet, and not all the information that makes the characters and their stories relevant has been given out yet. We're still sort of establishing our groundwork. And the way I've decided to do that, rather than, long bits of exposition, is to tell small stories that reveals different pieces of information as we go, so people slowly get a larger idea of what the world is and who the characters are and why we happen to be following their stories. So the show is still spooling up. So spoilers in this case, there might be elements of the world that I will at some point reveal through the narrative of the show that have not appeared yet. So don't worry about that. I will be talking about campaign up to episode 9. So if you haven't watched up to episode 9, there is some pretty critical information that got revealed in episode 9. So if I'm about to make reference to that, I will do my darndest to mention it before I launch into it, so nobody gets spoiled. But yeah, just be aware that you might get world information in this Q&A session that has not come up in the show yet, but is a part of the world and would be revealed through narrative otherwise. So it's not exactly a spoiler, because it's not going to ruin a surprise in the plot, but you'll be discovering information through a non-narrative means. So with that, the first question comes to me from Karina. And Karina actually asked a volley of questions, but all of them I think are really interesting to dive into. So we're going to do that. The first question that Karina asked is, how far is the distance of what you have recorded and where us listeners are at? So currently you are at episode 9. And we have recorded up through episode 16, I think. We're about 6 episodes ahead right now. That might change because of some things that you'll find out down the road. But we're going to end up re-recording an episode and releasing what we recorded as a bonus episode. There's some nonsense that went down, very similar actually to how early Star Wars campaign went down. So it'll be kind of interesting to explore that. But yes, there are branching possibilities. But yes, we are 6 episodes ahead, which at the current bi-weekly schedule that we're on means that recording-wise, we are 3 months ahead in our production schedule. Now, that isn't edited episodes. That is just like raw audio. As far as partially edited episodes, I am currently 4 episodes ahead in initial content passes, which is actually something that I'm going to be phasing out of our process for the show. Right now, with the episodes that we've recorded so far, most of them I have listened to and cut or rearranged some content on before sending it over to Casey Tony, our editor. So that's mostly because for campaign, we did a session 0. And we did a lot of our world building in session 0 and established some truths that I am slowly, as I said, revealing through narrative, through stories. And players, when we did our first few sessions, alluded to things that the audience doesn't really have a reference for. And, I haven't revealed in the story yet. So there'd be things that I would consider to be actual spoilers because the way that we can reveal that information could be narratively dynamic or interesting. And because they did that, I felt it would be wise to cut that material out of the show. I did that just because I kind of want to explore certain ideas through narrative. And when I was recording the initial couple episodes, I was so nervous about the whole thing. I didn't think about, exactly what we were saying in terms of narrative. And there were also certain details conflicted with details that would come up later in the fiction. And I didn't have a huge grip of the world yet. So I needed to take a moment, review what we recorded and prepare that material for Casey, because Casey doesn't know what story I'm planning on doing. It's not like in me editing One Shot or Casey editing Neoscum, where the person who has control of the editing process really has a firm grip on where the narrative is headed. Casey is doing his best to make what we record and what we give to him dramatic and interesting and cool. But he doesn't know if a spoiler popped up because he's not privy to what we did in our session 0. And he doesn't know exactly what information I plan on giving out through storytelling. So for those first couple episodes, I took the time to go through and really up through episode, I think 12 or 14. I have taken the time to address different things in the plot and present it to Casey in a way that I think will make it easier for Casey to turn in audio that we can then release to the public. I'm trying to phase that out. Now, when spoilers pop up in a recording session, I simply say to Casey, hey, we're going to take that bit out. Or, I just work harder to avoid giving out spoilers as we record the show. Because eventually, just because of how much work it is to edit and what I do already with One Shot and running the network and, writing and game design and all that, I want to try and reduce the impact that campaign is as an editing process, because I already have a really great editor in Casey, and I want to just depend on him and take full advantage of his skills, and not make it necessary for me to engage in editing each episode. So I'm trying to phase that out. And it's hard because it's working in a way that I've never really worked before on a podcast. I have so much control as editor of One Shot that it's kind of hard to give up and move back and have somebody else take over controlling the content for the show. So that's been interesting. But yeah, we are currently 6 episodes ahead. And our next recording is going to be in February. And like we structure our recordings to be 2 days in a row. So, we'll do an afternoon or an evening on a weekend and then do an evening on Monday. So each of those recording sessions, can potentially give us 3 hours of, performance audio. So we're going to come away from our next recording session with 4 to 6 new episodes worth of material. So as far as our production goes on the show, like we are extremely far ahead, especially for the biweekly schedule. And a big part of that is we want to be a weekly show. All of the performers are really invested in it, so we are producing right now at the rate we would have to produce material to create a weekly show. The thing that really changes when we go to that weekly schedule is how much editing Casey is doing, because when we eventually go weekly, right now, Casey edits Neoscum one week and then he'll edit Campaign the next. If we go weekly, there will be a week where he's editing both Neoscum and One Shot, and he's going to need a lot more time to do it. And part of what our goal is at the $8,500 level on Patreon is to give Casey enough money from the editing work that we hire him for to go down to a 4-day work week on his day job. So that will actually help him transition out of, a day job unrelated to his skills and interests and take him into being a professional entertainment creator, which is something, that Casey has talked to me about really wanting. And when I started taking One Shot full time, the first step I did when we were taking in more money is I took 1 day a week off of work and I devoted it to One Shot. And that slowly helped me transition out of that day job into being a professional, podcaster and performer. And I am really, really excited to help, create that opportunity for Casey, because I know how much it meant to me. Yeah, well, Molar Duck, it's nice to see you. Thank you so much for dropping in. So yeah, that's where we are in terms of episode production and how far we are ahead right now. The next is, how much have we developed in world building? And boy, howdy, that is a difficult question to answer. There are a lot of ideas that are right now floating around for the show that are not written down, and there's also a lot of material that is written down. We have created a lot of material surrounding broad strokes character arcs for these characters. I have a general idea of where I think Gable's story is going. I think I know where parts of Jonnet's story is going. Travis and Dref are kind of mysteries. I know things that I want to happen to those characters, and I think depending on their reactions to those events, that's going to really shape the overall character arcs that they're going to deal with. So world building information is really sort of spreads out from those character arcs and the information that I have surrounding those character arcs. The things that I want those characters to end up doing are really going to be informed and driven by world building information that surrounds that. So like all the world building stuff is moving in to support that. That said, I do have a lot of information about Sphere and how it operates as a world. to part the kimono in a Trist Valentine parlance, I have recently hired some freelancers to help contribute to our project, to flesh out the setting a little bit for Skyjacks, primarily because I wanted more perspectives and more expertise, frankly, than just mine. To contribute to the world, because I'm kind of limited in who I am as a person and like the perspectives that I have, and there's so much about other cultures of the world that I don't know. And sort of rather than hire a sensitivity consultant to look over, my guess at incorporating other cultures, I wanted to hire people with real cultural expertise to help make the world of Sphere feel like more of a multicultural effort, and to really make the world of Sphere like a world that feels real and fleshed out. And to do that, I just needed other people. It's so much better to go to somebody who has direct cultural expertise and be like, okay, informed by your experience and your expertise, what would you contribute to this world? And in order to do that, in the first place, I needed to compose a show Bible. So there is I think 15-page document right now that has a lot of rough ideas about different setting elements of Sphere. The things that I think are most important to make the world move, the things that make it possible for sky ships to be in the sky, the things that make the idea of sky piracy interesting, and things to support the idea of Sphere being a anti-colonial setting, of telling a narrative that challenges colonialism, and investigates an alternative way of thinking about the world and living. So I just sort of crafted the setting around that, and I tried to put as much essential information as possible into that show Bible. The show Bible has a timeline for events in Sphere, that sort of track like when Araners became a thing, when the stars fell, making the sea dangerous, necessitating the creation of Araners in the first place. I've got information about a couple key locations in the setting. I've got information about like the major forces that make the world work. Like I've got some fairly detailed notes on the red feathers and how they interact with the world and sort of what their goals are as an organization, and what makes them compelling antagonists. So it's really hard to define exactly what we've done in world building so far, because it's all unfolding right now. There's not enough information that I think to fill a setting book right now. I kind of feel like the show needs to get it to a point, at least in the episodes that we have recorded, where I feel like all of the information about the characters is on the table, because that reveals, like the extent of what's possible in the world that's going to come up. The last thing I want to do is release a setting book in the first year of us doing this podcast and realize, oh, there is so much more valuable information to come out after that kind of invalidates what we're working with already. So I don't have enough to make a setting book. I did have enough to make a show Bible and start getting other people to collaborate who are not performers to expand this setting. But yeah, so that's what we've done. What is my favorite thing about the group dynamic so far? I mean, gosh, that's a tough question to answer too, because I really like working with this particular group of people. I've been working with Johnny and JPC for years now. JPC was on the first episode of One Shot that I did. And I've grown to admire him as a performer so much. Like when he came in to do that, I had no idea what to expect about him as a performer. And each new episode that I had him on, he just kept, being entertaining and brilliant and interesting in so many ways, and really blew me away. So I love working with him. I love working with Johnny. Johnny was in one of the first like role playing games that I ran. I think just before I started doing one shot, I was running a Pathfinder game for him. And he is like, he really didn't invest in the mechanics of the game, like even back when we were playing Pathfinder, but he loved being his character. And like he had a real passion for it, and he made so many interesting decisions, and I kept wanting to play with him as a player. So like when we were putting together the Star Wars episodes for One Shot, I knew Johnny loved Star Wars, and when Kat was like asking for cast suggestions, I was like, "Oh, Johnny O'Mara. There's no question we're going to pull him in." And over the years, like he played Lenik Gilo, who is just such a multifaceted and layered character, and also in many ways not a character at all. Like only Johnny could play Lenik, which is kind of beautiful. And as far as Liz is somebody who I worked with on a late night show concept that Johnny was doing with his friends, and they hired Liz and I as writers. And I was so impressed by Liz's work ethic on that show. Like both of us really put a lot of effort into writing, and Liz was somebody who, whenever she was in the room and I was reading my scripts, I was always looking to impress Liz because I wanted to feel like I wasn't wasting her time. And I was so anxious about asking her to do One Shot, because like she is so talented and so dedicated and so professional about what she does. Like I almost felt embarrassed taking my silly passion project to her, but she thankfully came and did episodes with us, and she's amazing. She's hilarious. I love her to death. So I'll talk about this later because somebody else asked a question that's kind of relevant to this, but like I was very excited at the opportunity to add Liz to the cast, and I'm so glad that she's here. And finally, Tyler is one of my comedian friends who works a lot. He is performing almost every night. He's a talented person, and that talent has been recognized by some of the theaters around Chicago, which means that I unfortunately don't get the opportunity to perform with Tyler that often because his schedule is so packed. And we've had him on a few episodes of One Shot, and I think the first one we had him on was Shinobi Gami, and that was a game that I didn't have a lot of real expectations for. I didn't know what to get out of it. And due in large part to Tyler's contributions, like it ended up being really emotional and dramatic in a way that really surprised me for like a ninja battling game. And from that moment, like I knew, oh, this guy is incredible, and I want to work with him at every opportunity. So he is one of the names that I floated to Kat when we were going about the difficult work of casting Blue and Zero. And, shortly after meeting Tyler and hearing Tyler, playing with Tyler, Kat was like, oh, yeah, we have our Zero. That's it. We don't even have to think about this. And, there was the long process of finding Jim for Blue after that. But Tyler is incredible, and I getting to work with all of these people, the way they work together and support each other's ideas, and how excited they are about the story that we're telling, is just great. It made the very intimidating prospect of having to follow something like Star Wars campaign not as scary. because I felt like the people that I were doing it with really believed in what we were doing and were happy to do it. And, I know just from what we've done so far, because we're only really starting out right now, that we have some really fascinating places to go. So I guess what I love about the group dynamic is that we work so well together, and we're so excited to be doing what we're doing. I don't know. It's just great to work with people that you respect. Karina's next question is, can you share the Luminaries deck meaning on the site? And this is a question that I get a lot. Let's the way I made them was tying together themes from Illimat and the Decemberist songs that inspired each Luminary card in that game. So the first core set of Illimat is based on the album Hazards of Love, and each of the Luminaries is either a sort of character from the Hazards of Love story, or it is a theme that is expressed through the Hazards of Love album. Like maybe it's a setting element, like the river or something like that. So what Keith did when he created those Luminaries is he attached mythological and iconographic significance to images from this story. And he did it in a way that was modeled after tarot cards. And after playing Invisible Sun and using the Sooth deck, I became enamored with the idea of tarot and interpretation-based fortune telling as a method for generating narrative. So I wanted to take the groundwork that had already been laid by Keith in creating these Luminaries. Keith had very intelligently and carefully identified, and I don't know that it was entirely Keith because it was a collaboration. There were Carson was creating the art for these, and I know all of the Decemberists were involved in some level in contributing to this game. I know Colin did a lot of writing for it. So the Luminary cards created a mythology out of this cool folk story that the Decemberists created based on other folk stories. And if you know Decemberists music, you know that they pull folk stories into what they do in performance a lot. The Crane Wife is based on a Japanese folk tale. Rusalka is based on Eastern European kind of legends and folklore. So they do it a lot. And what was really cool about Hazards of Love is they took existing folk songs, existing folk tales, and they made their own version of it. It's different than I consider the Crane Wife in many ways to be kind of a literal translation of the Crane Wife folk story to music, to a lyrical form. Whereas Hazards of Love is a new take using themes from similar folk stories. So anyway, the Keith Baker and the Decemberists and Carson Ellis took these images from Hazards of Love. If I could actually get some water. Took these images from Hazards of Love and they made them into this mythological language through the Luminaries. And the effects they have on that game just give the Luminary cards a lot of gravity. It makes those cards and ideas feel very powerful. Chat says hi, baby. Hi. Mel says hi back. So I took that groundwork that had already been laid by all of this wonderful creative work that was done by Keith and Carson and the Decemberists, and I applied it to the structure that existed with the Sooth deck and exists with tarot cards. So I looked at the meaning that they have in like the different cards have in tarot to try and identify what I thought would be important themes to have in fortune telling, because the conceit of tarot, if you are not a believer in fortune telling, the conceit of tarot is to create structures that people can impose their own meanings onto, to make it look like what you're doing is, cleverly and magically examining parts of their life and personality and expressing them through cards. And these ideas are vague enough and well defined enough that a person can go in for a fortune reading, and in the future they can see like, oh, that idea came up in my card reading, so the magic that was happening is real. That person really told my future using those cards. So I sort of I scraped through what we have in tarot to like go, okay, what is a necessary theme that we need? And I took that thematic structure, and I also took cues from the Sooth deck too for finding necessary themes. I took that thematic structure and I imposed it on the story value that we get from those Luminary cards based on their mechanics in Illimat and based on their actual story impact in the Hazards of Love album, and for the Crane Wife expansion for the Crane Wife album. So excuse me. So I just tried to stay faithful to the ideas that the Decemberists attached to those symbols in their music, and also stay like apply then those ideas to the world building at large for Sphere. So if we're going to take an example, there's the Rake card. If you've listened to the Hazards of Love album, you know that the Rake is a real bastard of a character. He's somebody who gets married because he wants to have sex with a woman and has a bunch of babies, and then his wife, who he hated, dies, and he kills all of his children so that he can be free of the obligation of supporting them. He's kind of a character that is defined by his desire for more, his greed and selfishness. He sucks, and he's a really bad dude. So when I was creating Luminaries, he was actually the first Luminary that I wrote up, and his themes are greed, appetite, cruelty, and resentment. So he's driven by a greed and an insatiable appetite for more. He's a tyrant who wants to control things and get new things. His cruelty is pretty evident because he supports his greed by destroying the things around him. And resentment, he resents he resents like things in his life that other people would be grateful for. So the dude is bad, and the Luminary itself, like the divination for that Luminary is also not great, because it means that your character is giving into negative impulses, or it means the world around you is going to treat you brutally or try to extract things from you. The divination that I wrote up for the Rake is, the Rake almost always suggests danger. While desire is natural, the Rake makes it dark. Something base is being pursued, relentlessly and at the expense of all other things. This is the sort of desire that hurts people and destroys beauty. The Rake is bad pretty much no matter what. And it might mean, if you are somebody who is getting a divination of the Rake, it might mean it's time for you to review your behavior. If we apply it to the narrative sense in the game, because as we know, we've been using the luminaries to drive narrative. If, say, Travis were to pull the rake in a area like where he was searching through cargo, I might say, okay, because the rake is influencing this scene, it means that your desire for wealth, to steal from the cargo of the civility, is going to overwhelm your desire to protect Jonnet and make sure that he makes it out of this safely. So, given the chance, you will add to your own personal wealth before you protect Jonnet. So that's like kind of what I'm working with for those. Now I have Luminaries written out for everything from the Crane Wife album and everything from the core Hazards of Love set. I also have the meaning written up for the limited edition Rusalka. There are a few luminaries that I have created specifically for the world of Sphere. That, like, I know what they do in Illimat, and I know thematically what I want, but I actually just haven't gotten around to writing them up yet. Also, Keith is currently working on new luminaries, and most of them are luminaries that I think would apply to the world of Sphere. So I'll also be doing write-ups for those. But all of this is to say that this is a really involved process that I do to create these luminaries, and I'm constantly rewriting things as new luminaries get introduced so that I can sharpen and clarify the themes of the luminaries that we have in existence. For a while, because I didn't know Keith was going to make a luminary for Rusalka, I was treating the river and Rusalka as the same thing, because the folktale about Rusalka, this river spirit that lures men to their death through her sexuality, is in a river itself. So the original river divination that I had put temptation as one of its main themes. As soon as we had a Rusalka card, it no longer became appropriate for the river to keep temptation as a theme. So I shifted that over to Rusalka, and I made the river's write up a little bit more defined and bespoke. So yeah, it's an involved process, which means I really can't afford to post the luminary divinations that I have publicly for free. At some point I might actually release a portion of what I've got written up in a bespoke packet. But it's probably going to have to be for money. This is definitely something that will eventually be a part of a world book. But I appreciate and understand people's desire to start engaging with this kind of system as soon as they can. So there's a storytelling game that I'm working on that's kind of driven by the luminaries that's not strictly a role-playing game, and I previewed that a little bit at a catacon, and that went well, so I'll be playtesting that more and seeing how that evolves. And once I get the current luminaries that I know about written out, I will take a look at what it would take for me to lay out a portion of what I've produced so far and put it in a PDF that I would sell through drive-through. And that wouldn't be for too much money, but I've put a lot of work into these, and I want to compensate myself for that. There is a chance that if I do something like that, you will see a preview of that work that I will post publicly for free. The other thing that factors into all of this is I'm right now working in close partnership. Well, not close partnership, but I'm working in association with Together Studios, in that Keith currently approves of everything that we're doing for the show. So I don't want to violate that. So any plans that I have to monetize or use this stuff that we've generated, I need to run that by Keith first. So I just want to make sure that he is informed and supportive and continues to be supportive of all of that, because, Illimat is also like his IP, and we definitely recognize that. So I don't have any hard answers about when a world book would be released and when these Luminary divinations are going to be accessible. Part of it is we're still playtesting them right now. Like, meanings are still changing. So we'll sharpen the ideas about our Luminaries right now and get them to the point where they're ready for publication of some kind. And as soon as I can, I'll have a talk with the folks over at Together Studios and see what our action plan moving forward for those are, and like how our partnership operates in that. So I don't have, solid answers for you on all of that right now, but know that they are forthcoming, and that I am definitely working on a way to get to a position where I can release these. So that was just one person's question. The next question that I have is, which Decemberist songs / albums had the biggest influence on the development of the setting? And boy, howdy, is this another complicated question to answer. Oh my gosh. Liz is expecting to join this soon. I'm going to send Liz a quick message letting her know that I'll need another 10 minutes. Need another 10 minutes. Sorry for who I am as a person. Oh, Jiz Manderson is here. Sorry, Liz. I will invite you in soon. I just got to get through this question first. So anyway, it's a complicated question because really the entire Decemberists discography has played a part in this setting. I have listened to every Decemberist song that I have access to multiple times, and many of those songs in multiple formats, like through live show recordings and through album, like studio album recordings. So I've also been, tearing through the lyrics and really trying to figure out how to apply those ideas and themes to what we're doing. I think generally speaking, what the Decemberists bring to the table in terms of inspiration is a tone. Almost every Decemberist song has a song about sailors, about maritime professionals, and all of those songs are kind of tragic, and they tell stories that are sad and terrible, and these people are living these desperate lives that end cruelly and far too quickly. And I think that idea, the idea of that strife, really tells us something that is awful about the world that we are in as a whole. I see the struggle against capitalism and the way capitalism treats and uses people in those songs about sailors. And, colonialism also plays a huge part. A lot of the terrible acts that are taking place in Decemberist songs are related to or driven by colonialism in some way. So overall, the Decemberists are bringing a real mood to the table that shows up prominently in the setting. Obviously, following what I said earlier, albums and songs that are associated with the Luminaries that show up in Illimat are hugely influential because they generated the concepts and characters that created massive cornerstones of the setting. For example, Changelings, the Mariner, the Bandit Queen, who is actually someone that you haven't met yet, but I talked a little bit on the campaign Twitter. All have, and that was when I was investigating Oromar Vale's backstory. All of those have direct influential links to albums and music from the Decemberists. Probably the heaviest influence, just because of the nature of Illimat, is going to be from Hazards of Love. The tale of Margaret and the Changeling is a foundational folktale for Sphere. So much comes from there. It's a single story, so it's really easy for me to use it as a guide for the world. And because Illimat broke down that story into mythological iconography, it's even easier for me to like take those images and apply them to a setting and, you know, make natural conclusions based on that information. Also, you know, for that reason, the Crane Wife is a tremendous influence on the setting, because the second set of Luminaries was created based off of that album. But you know what might surprise some people is when I was first musing on the world of Sphere, or a world like Sphere, I was listening to the newest album from the Decemberists, "I'll Be Your Girl," or the newest full album, the newest LP, I guess. I was going through it multiple times a day at that point, and listening to those lyrics, clear stories were forming in my head. And when I was confronted with, you know, having to create Sphere, I really wanted to mythologize those songs and the stories that I got from those songs in the way that Illimat had done for Hazards of Love. So for an example, the cutting stone. James, it's negative many degrees. Let Liz in. Yeah, Liz can be outside for a little bit longer. She's not outside. She is safe in her home and just awaiting a Discord invite. Anyway, Cutting Stone is a great example of this. The song in "I'll Be Your Girl" is either about a human murderer or a supernatural force that puts people out of their misery. You know, it talks about a child that's lost its parents getting killed, a groom grieving for a dying bride that gets killed, and it is so. For Sphere, what I did is I took this idea of the cutting stone and made it a euphemism for death in the world. But woven into that euphemism, there's like a cruelty that sort of acknowledges the general random cruelty of the world, but also the mercy and kindness, like in quotes, kindness, of the idea of the cutting stone, because it is this thing that, you know, finds people who are in true emotional distress and stops that. And, you know, even if that is really, really super dark and grim, the world of Sphere, you know, takes place in something that would be the past for us, where death is a larger part of life than it is in our current era. Like if we were growing up in the 16 or 1700s, if you were lucky enough to make it to adulthood, you would know more than a few people who were your same age and are already dead if you reached your 20s. So the idea of death being this thing that is scary and cruel, but also eases suffering that people cannot under their own power overcome, is, you know, it's an interesting thing to add to the setting. And so that's why Bound for the Cutting Stone, Arnie's song, uses cutting stone as like a euphemism for death. Like Bound for the Cutting Stone is a battle song. You know, it's something people sing about, the idea that they're off to fight and off to die, and there will be glory in that. So, you know, that's going to pop up in the show. And like all of that was pulled and more. Like Star Watcher also has a tremendous influence from "I'll Be Your Girl." And actually, from a kind of an interesting coincidental note, when I went to see the Decemberists in concert, when they toured this album through Chicago, I was sitting in the theater looking at the stage set that they had, and listening to like the mood music that they had playing in the theater, and looking around how they had decorated the theater. And I started musing on a setting where like the primary motivation of PCs would be to kill a god. And that sort of worked its way into the setting of Sphere, with the Church of the Slain God. And, thinking about a god that did exist and had power, and then was destroyed in some way. So like, I think there was a lot of like really fortuitous coincidences that played into it. But if you are looking for the top songs that I think right now are influencing the setting, I compiled a small list that is The Crane Wife 1, 2, and 3, Sons and Daughters, and those would both be off of the Crane Wife album. Then from Hazards of Love, The Queen's Rebuke is really important, and Hazards of Love 1 is super important. From I'll Be Your Girl, Cutting Stone, Star Watcher, and Rusalka. From The King is Dead, Rise to Me and Calamity Song, and Rocks in the Box, along with This Is Why We Fight. I really dug into that album. There's a lot of stuff there that I feel very directly relates to the characters that we're dealing with. Then from earlier albums, we've got From My Own True Love. There's Chimbley Sweep, of course, the Mariner's Revenge song, and The Bandit Queen, which, again, you have not seen the influence of the Bandit Queen in the setting yet, but I'm extremely excited about it. And yes, I can definitely post that on Twitter later. Okay, I think now is about time that I invite Liz to this, so she's not just forced to watch me stumble through all of this. So I'm going to open up Discord, and okay. I'm not an expert at Discord, but Discord provides like the best like connection that I know about for remote meetings. So I'm trying to shift over to it, but a lot of that is me stumbling to use it like an old man. Oh, great. Yep, I've definitely found Liz. And now I am inviting her in, and I think Liz has just accepted. Her microphone is muted right now, so if she was planning on talking, she's going to have to unmute that before we can continue. Liz, unmute your mic. Please unmute that mic. And I'm going to switch it. Ooh,
I muted it.
Oh yeah, Liz is here.
Here she is.
She seems super prepared. And
we are both old. Remember this.
We're super old people, I think, is really the thing that I want people to take away. I'm going to open up this window capture. This is the best I can do, everyone. This horrible thing that you're seeing is the best that I can really do to show off Liz.
I mean, if you really want, you could just do audio, but
yeah, I mean, we definitely could. Actually, you know what? Let's just do audio because I realized I need to use your window anyway for reading the questions that we have. So
whatever, man.
Yeah.
Me.
Okay. So the next question actually comes from Alice, and it is a question about a subject that I think you, Liz, would have a lot to add to. And it is, will we encounter some form of phoenix on the show? Love those big old firebirds. Will we encounter some, that was, I just pasted it in twice because I am a Neanderthal. But But yeah,
This is a good question though.
but Liz, you realize that big giant birds are your idea.
Well, here's the thing. So I was listening to this is giving me some insight on you as well, and like how we're doing this. It's when we did our session 0, we like laid some templates for you, right? And said, here's things I'd like to accomplish. Here's an idea that I have for this character. Like, for example, JPC has a very strong point of view of what Dref was, what he wants to be.
Right. But
I think, in my opinion, after the session 0 ended, this went out of our hands. So the existence of like different types of magic, I think, is sort of more of a you thing.
Part of it, but also, I mean, a thing that you all have to realize is that the collaboration that we have is ongoing. You know, it's not just that you introduced ideas in session 0 and then I'm taking them away from you and making them my own. It's an ongoing conversation. So if it is important and interesting to you that there be a phoenix at some point, baby, we can find a phoenix.
Not currently important to me.
Well, cool. I mean, that is just something I personally very much like phoenixes. The thing, Alice, that I will say about phoenixes getting incorporated into the setting is it's a mythological creature, and mythological creatures carry metaphorical weight to them. So like the death, rebirth aspect of a phoenix is like an important thing that you start to deal with when you bring it into the story. So I think unless there is a player who has a really good idea or is hell-bent on phoenixes being part of the setting, the thing that would invite phoenixes in as a going concern would be that death rebirth cycle becoming important and necessary to what we're doing thematically.
Narrative drives any and all considerations.
Exactly. So yeah, you know, possibly.
I'll do it. I'll fucking do it.
Yeah, Liz will threaten to ask for things. Okay, so this next question comes from JPC, and again, I think this is a question that Liz could answer, and that is, how big the birds poop?
Are you really doing this to me?
Yeah, Liz, how big the birds poop?
Did you really just bring me in to answer questions about goddamn birds?
No, we'll move on to other things, but I do need an answer.
Oh, do people poop in Star Wars? No, they don't. No one does.
Oh, wow. So have we confirmed that nobody poops?
I mean, that will make my life a lot easier.
Well, I will consider the possibility of this being a non-pooping setting.
Above it, you know? I think we're above like bodily functions.
I guess that's true. I mean, it makes me worry about different setting elements like the but for, and I don't necessarily want to take. Damn it! I was really hoping you would fall into that trap, but you did not.
No, you're the worst person. I'm too smart for you.
Liz is too smart for me. Okay. So here's a question that actually is meant for you, Liz, and this comes from Alex Flanagan, who is one of our newest members of the One Shot Network. And Alex asks, what do each of you have the most in common with your character? And in what way do you wish you were more like your character?
Oof. Wow. First of all, like, I've been listening to the stream, and it's like, if we're discussing like mutual respect, I respect James like very, very much. My interactions with him in person and in real life have very little bearing on my actual respect for him as a person. But that means, like, when I was brought on to Campaign, I was a fan of Campaign first, and I thought, like, this is an incredible series. I don't know what I'm going to do with it. Gable is sort of deliberately a departure from the type of characters that I normally play, which are like it was partially because I was interested in doing a character that was like more traditionally RPG, like your ideal version of yourself, like big and strong. But also in the sense that there's an intimidation factor when you're at the table with people like Tyler and JBC and Johnny, who are literal like masters of the form. And I didn't think I was going to be best suited trying to be like a quippy little character. So I don't think Gable and I are necessarily similar in any way, which honestly makes it a little bit somewhat difficult to play, but more of like an interesting, good challenge. So there's many ways in which I would aspire to be Gable, but here I am again, little me. I would aspire to be Gable, but then I think our similarities are our desire, our ways of pushing people away, which is a little sad.
So yeah, like you did mention that it was aspirational a little bit. What parts of Gable do you actually, wish you had more of in you?
All
You just want to be 7 feet tall, huh?
don't we all? And also with moral clarity, I think but that's also sort of like Gable's constant internal conflict, is that there is no such thing as moral clarity.
Mm-hmm.
But it makes life a lot more straightforward and easier to work with when have a feeling that something good versus something's evil. And that's something that we don't have the luxury of in real life.
Yeah, and definitely, like I think that's interesting. Yeah, moral clarity, I do think, is one of the central conflicts that Gable has as a character. So it is interesting that in a way, even though they are searching for that clarity, they certainly have more clarity than we have access to as people. So that's pretty neat.
Yeah, we've done a lot of work with Gable in particular for the past 9 episodes, and I'm looking forward to at least a little break.
Yeah. We definitely for our next couple arcs will be shifting some of the limelight away from Gable so that other characters get a chance to develop themselves.
Get stuff done, and I get that.
But I am super excited for Gable's whole story, and I really liked what we've done with it so far.
Yeah, and that's very much a credit to you. Like, there's stuff that James has put into the story that were just like minutia that I just mentioned offhand in session 0 that he's like glommed onto, which has been like more than anything, working with James is very instructive and has left me very spoiled for playing games in real life, which I don't want to do ever.
That's interesting. I actually, since we're talking about Gable, one of the questions that we got, and I need to credit this one properly, is when we are going to get the chance to see some character art.
That's a you question, isn't it?
Yeah. So that came from Beth. When are we going to see official character art? Because it can't be found on the site, and a lot of people have been asking this question because we've been in process on getting that art created. But Gable's art is done, and while what I'm about to show you is not the final art for Gable,
really?
This is the character, and there we go. That's Gable. While people.
Ooh, fuck yeah.
Get the opportunity to just drink Gable in for a moment. I wanted to ask you, Liz, because you have said, like, kind of offhandedly that you're not interested in playing games. And I'm just curious, what do you like? Do you like playing role playing games? Because I make you do it a lot. It's okay not to like learning the rules, but do you enjoy the process of roleplay?
I like and I understand the appeal. I think what I like about role playing games is what people like about games in general is that you get to play with your friends.
Mm-hmm.
And despite being your contractually obligated playmate, I still get to play with my friends. And that's kind of like the platonic ideal of what improv is supposed to be.
Mm-hmm.
So like the times that I have the best time are just when we're talking at the table. And in a perfect world, I would love to play games if it were just that forever.
That's neat. Like, is it like, do you enjoy improv more or the game playing more?
Improv for sure. Like when we do those Dear Heroes, it's my favorite sessions.
Because and is that just because you're in an area where you feel confident, or are you actively enjoying the frameworkless improv more than you are the structure of the game?
I think it's a different type of enjoyment. I think my enjoyment of the game sessions are more like, in a way, like enjoying the presentation of a story that I'm part of, but I'm not necessarily like it. Like, frankly, it's kind of watching James perform. Like that's real.
That makes sense. I can see that.
And the Dear Heroes are more just like each of us having the opportunity to make each other laugh without having to worry about fucking up a story.
Well, I do want to assure you that there is no way that you can. I don't want to say no way, because I realize your group is very imaginative, but I doubt that you would accidentally fuck up the story.
Well, you can derail a scene enough to make it unusable, and that's a different thing.
For sure. Yeah, I don't know. I am not worried about y'all kicking over my sandcastle, I guess.
Our bullies, though, we're very much.
You're very good and talented bullies, and I'm super proud of you for that. but like I do feel, at least for the time being, where we are in the story right now, I do feel that everybody is bought in. And because of that, I'm not worried about the choices that you're making as performers and players.
I never want to give anyone the impression that I have a disrespect for games, or that I don't like games in general. That's more of like playing up a joke.
For
like
sure.
I respect the industry, and please no one get angry at me, but it's more of a sense of like I wasn't born in it. And
yeah. Well, and I think that informs that could inform like a lot of how a lot of people interpret your performances too. I think everybody that I have spoken to just about you generally appearing on our shows for a long time has identified that they like you. You know, one of the reasons that we keep inviting you back is people keep demanding to hear more from you. So like. I don't think anybody like looks down on it. And I think it is interesting, especially hearing from somebody in your position who has portrayed so many characters that people really latched on to and loved, to hear that you have a lack of confidence in it, or, you know, don't feel fully comfortable. Because I think a lot of people who listen to our shows, even though they love games, don't feel fully comfortable playing those games and don't feel super confident in everything they do with it. So I feel like that's something people can relate to.
Yeah. And there's a whole question of like, One Shot is in a unique position where they're, in my opinion, kind of forerunners of RPG as performance, where performance is paramount and story is paramount, versus like mechanics are sort of like, this is a thing that we have to deal with, but very secondary or tertiary. And I think that those things necessarily disagree, but it's a funny little space that the four of us occupy within the greater industry.
Yeah. Yeah, it is like kind of a neat little exploration that we get to do here.
Mhm.
And really, this is sort of creative frontier territory, which is very exciting. Like forms that are adjacent.
Yeah.
Yeah, like we
Critical Role maybe, but yeah.
we're inventing the rules as we go, which is super
Yeah.
rad. I guess that's what improv is all about. Um,
And then-
Alex asked another question of us that I definitely think you can weigh on, and that is, what excited you the most about this world while building it? And as I think you've identified, Liz, like a lot of your world building you felt happened in session 0, but like, was there anything that you added, or I expanded on that you added that you really latched onto and like to think about?
There's a lot that I like about it. Uh, or had the opportunity to be like, which is so like I understand why people do it. It's so much fun. Like I've only ever done one shots. I've never done a campaign.
Mhm.
So having the opportunity to like do real combat and in a world that is like pirates are inherently on the outside of the law, so you're not beholden to a whole lot of things besides your own personality.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, it definitely gives you I feel like more consequences for your exploration because it's long form role playing. Like Gable as a character has to really be there next session. So you
Yeah.
have more impetus to be careful with them. Like I think of what we did with City of Mist and your character Excalibur, and how at the end of that series you killed Excalibur off in like
And he wouldn't let me die.
yeah, I because I didn't want you to, because I knew people would want to hear more from that character, but eventually we did kill you. Um so like
The worst thing you've ever done in campaign is tell me that I can start taking straight like hit points from strain. So now I'm never going to protect myself ever.
well, that will definitely lead to some tense moments, I am sure. Um to answer this question myself, the setting element that I really like, I think the one that I care the most about is Featherweave. I spent a lot of time thinking of it because it's kind of a foundational thing that drives and defines the world. JPC and Johnny, like back at the origin of Skyjacks, originally came to me with this idea, kind of divorced from the idea of it being the next campaign. They were like, we want to do this project together, a new actual play project that is about sky pirates. Like that's the only idea they had. They didn't know who they wanted to GM it. They just knew they wanted to be in an actual play and have it be about sky pirates. Um, so like when that came to me and like it was a thing that like, okay, this could potentially be the next campaign. There are some things about sky pirates that like I want to be divorced from, and not a dunk on anybody who likes it, because I actually kind of enjoy it as a genre. I
Oh,
just didn't want it to influence our stuff, and that is steampunk. I wanted it to be really different from steampunk, especially when I started like developing the idea of what campaign, what sphere as a setting would be about. Steampunk is really grounded in the 1800s and early 1900s. There's but like the way people are dressed and like some of the fashions, especially the fashions that like would be on women at the time, people mistake it a lot for the Age of Sail. And pirates are a big theme that people bring into steampunk, because airships are like a huge driver for a lot of those settings. So to distinguish those, I wanted the explanation for what made flying ships possible in our setting, I wanted it to be magical. And a lot of that is also informed by the fact that this is an anti-colonial show and an anti-colonial narrative. And I feel like the technology of industrialization, the internal combustion engine, oil, and in a lot of ways coal, which is still a going concern in the Skyjack setting, that is the technology that fueled a lot of the negative aspects that we see of colonialization and capitalism. Like capitalism and industrialization go hand in hand. And like the oppressors were the ones who controlled these machines and dressed in these elaborate outfits. And for our setting, because I wanted it to be anti-colonial, I didn't want people, when they thought of it, to immediately be identifying with the oppressors of the setting. So creating that division of like, hey, this is magically based. It follows a logic. People treat the magic that is featherweave as kind of a mundane part of life. Like to a Skyjack, featherweave is just the thing that keeps them in the air. They're not spending a lot of time trying to unravel the mysteries of what allows featherweave to float. Like they know that they don't have those answers. They don't have access to those answers. And it's really not important for what they have to do to unravel what that is. And this sort of ties into what I wanted with the logo for campaign. I chose a ship with wings because I wanted to convey a feeling of wonder in the setting. I wanted it to be that the answers that we're looking for as to how this setting works can be found in folk tales and like things that are older than the technology that really informs and fleshes out a steampunk setting. So
James, you're talking about a logo. Can we get that? Is that a logo that you can get on like t-shirts or bags or?
You're absolutely right. It is.
Other products?
Yeah, it's that logo is now available on lots of different things in many different formats that can be found on One Shot's TeePublic store, which is linked to off the One Shot website. But
you truly don't know who gets the money for the merch.
The network does.
Yeah, the network makes sense.
I don't even see it.
Really.
We use the money that we get from, oh goodness, this is enormous. We use the money that we get from.
It's so big, James.
Merch. I know it's enormous. I mean, this is because this is like the super full high def version of the logo. Oh my God, it's still going. We use all that to make more merchandise is really what happens. So like if you buy the fun shirts and merch associated with campaign, that will help guarantee that there is more fun merchandise that comes out of campaign. But there it is. There's our flying ship logo. So yeah, it was important to me that like the age of sail really be evoked for this, and like maybe up to the golden age of whaling, which is early 1800s. So we're starting to knock on the door of that steampunk territory. But really, this is. I think the 1800s and 1900s are kind of defined as eras as being frontier science and discovery eras. Like you even get elements of that in the late 1700s with like people like Benjamin Franklin, who is this noted inventor and explorer, somebody who is trying to explain the world around him. Whereas I think the 1700s and 1600s are really based around the discovery of things that cannot be immediately explained. So 1800s and 1900s, it feels like, oh, we're gaining mastery over the world. And the 1700s, 1600s, where we've kind of set the game is about, oh, the world is so much bigger than we could ever possibly comprehend. So that's kind of why I like Featherweave. Um, the next is coming from Orthopraxy, and the question is, how did you arrive at the Weekend at Bernie's concept? Did that come before or after the idea of Sky Pirates? After. That's actually something that happened in our session 0.
Yeah.
And I think like it both evolved like kind of naturally and out of the fact that very quickly after we started doing campaign, there were like memes made about campaign, people expecting campaign to be a Star Wars adventure story, and what campaign actually ended up being was kind of a found family emotional exploration of these characters. And the comparison that got drawn was like Full House and Three Men and a Baby. And we really sort of leaned into and embraced the idea of Three Men and a Baby being like a foundational part of that story. So the logic was behind Weekend at Bernie's being this kind of major story element of what we were doing, is that we already took like kind of a bad 80s comedy and made it central to what we were doing in the first campaign. So we might as well keep that thing going in the second campaign.
Yeah. And JPC was pretty set on being a necromancer. So it's kind of like, well, how are we going to indicate that the man is a necromancer? I'm like, well, there's a body would be good.
Yeah. Well, and also like the thing about necromancy and storytelling is in certain ways it removes stakes, right? It takes a certain kind of death off the table. And you like ideally with all character decisions and aspects, you're trying to make it so that those choices add to the drama of a game. And with giving him like the captain being a secret that he and the rest of the crew have to keep, like it is an endless font for dramatic decisions. As we've already seen, and a lot of those are silly, and a lot of those will be tense at certain points. Let's see. What's your favorite detail of skyship design that hasn't come up on the show yet?
Yeah, James, what good about boat?
Well, I think we've investigated a lot of it, and really the thing I think that I'm most impressed with about skyship design isn't even my idea. I really have to credit Erica Chappell, who consulted me alongside Ben Zweifel in creating like kind of the mechanics for how skyships operate in the setting. And one of the ideas that Erica brought to the table, and I called this out in the episode itself, is the concept of the heart bell. A big, huge church-style bell that would be in the relative center of a ship, that if the ship were to start to list to a dangerous degree, the bell would ring, notifying the captain and crew that perhaps something is amiss and they really need to deal with that. I love the heart bell. It's such a cool design. Obviously it's already part of the show. So I don't know if there's anything particularly right now that hasn't shown up yet that I think is cool. I mean, Liz, is there anything that you would like to see on these big, beautiful flying boats?
That's the thing. Like, I think anything that's unseen right now are things on land, unfortunately. So we spent 9 episodes exploring, like, boat's boat.
That's true. I mean, and that boat is going to be where we live for a large portion of the foreseeable future. But we are about to discover new, neat things about the land and sphere and the people who live there and what those places are like. So I'm pretty excited about all that.
I think what's good about the boats is that how parallel they are to ships.
Mhm.
These are just like ships in the sky and with minor modifications for logistics.
Yeah. Like I really like the look of ships, and I think it's kind of an important thing to evoke the idea of pirates, especially the kind of adventure-y pirates that we want to feature on campaign. So like I tried to preserve as much visually as I could about Age of Sail ships as I could. Like even though it doesn't make sense. Like if you were to build a flying machine, it probably wouldn't look like a boat.
Of
Um,
course not.
so I did a lot of intellectual work to justify why these boats are actually boats. Um, the next question is an interesting aspect of the backstory of the show, and that is what was that comes from Vectin 404. What was the discussion about the new campaign like, and how long until you decided to bring people in who weren't JPC and Johnny O'Mara? Um,
Oh,
and this is actually a really neat coincidence. So Kat had told us that she was contemplating wrapping up the previous campaign within like a year of some of our most recent episodes. She informed us that we were probably approaching the last arc of the game. And when Johnny and JPC heard that, their first assumption was that there probably wouldn't be space for them in the next project. Now, as a person who likes working with those dudes, like I knew that I would find something to work on with them, even if it wasn't going to be campaign. So they had started brainstorming the idea of their Sky Pirates actual play, whether I would be involved with that or not. It was something that they wanted to develop for the One Shot Network. And when Kat, came to me and said that she actually needed to step away from the network much sooner than we had. Like, actually, we hadn't talked about her just stepping away from the network at all. But when she told me that she wanted to step away from the network and that campaign would have to conclude as a result of that, um, I was trying to figure out, okay, like what's the next show going to look like? And really I've thought, okay, there's no way I can know generally what the next show will look like, but who do I want to do that with? And while Johnny and JPC were developing their Sky Pirates idea, that is also a question that they asked themselves is what performers do we want to bring into our new show? And both Johnny and JPC and I had independently decided that probably the people we wanted to ask first were Liz Anderson and Tyler Davis. Um, so before we knew what Skyjacks was going to be, like even vaguely, like beyond the idea that Sky Pirates, we knew that independently, before I even knew that Skyjacks was the thing, that Liz and Tyler were probably going to be people that we approached about it, and we were fortunate enough to have them join us in the cast, which is super rad.
I mean, I saved Johnny from a swamp in Florida like 10 years ago, so he owes me for the next 20 years.
That's I truly hope that is a real story.
It's not untrue.
I brought you out of this swamp and I can put you back in it.
Ain't that the way, you know?
um what is the coolest idea that you had for this setting that you decided not to use? Um I think in the beginning, during that session 0, there were a lot of different ideas flying back and forth. And we were originally envisioning this as a world that had more non-human people in it. Like
Yeah, that's something that we haven't run into it, but we talked a lot about like certain types of like animal people and like more like alien-esque, sort of
yeah.
like more Star Wars diversity of species, but we haven't run into that quite yet.
Yeah, yeah. And like I think originally Tyler had a completely different character concept for Jonnet, and the only thing that has really stayed between his old concept and the new concept is three eyes. Because we were like trying to design for, okay, well, we want a world with like non-human people. What is that going to look like? Tyler, looked through the options that were presented in Genesis and found this species of people that have three eyes, and that's what he picked. And like eventually, the story became that Jonnet got this third eye after touching. Well, I mean, Jonnet got this third eye. We'll learn about how it happened in like 2 episodes from now. So yeah, to not spoil stuff. So Jonnet got that third eye rather than being born with it. Jonnet got it through happenstance. And like Liz also, I think very, very quickly with Gable, you brought up the idea of being an angel, right?
Oh, well, it's a Genesis type that we've modified.
Yeah, like I think
And I don't remember what it was.
it was, I think it came from the space opera set. And basically the stats of it were that, or the explanation is like, you're like a human, but better in every way imaginable.
Yeah, it like some sort of like beyond human sort of thing. And then you asked the question, Liz, is Gable an angel? And that was kind of like, oh, okay, yeah.
Oh, wow. I didn't even
That
realize.
Yeah, you did.
I mean, we've got it recorded, but I always remember that situation as like you coming to me and being like, I want to be an angel. And I was like, oh,
I never
wow,
considered
dope.
it until we started thinking about it. And it played into a lot of the themes that we were looking at anyway, like church and that, like, do gods exist, things like that. And yeah, it was a collaboration sort of thing that I came in. The only thing I wanted when I came in was like a fighter.
Yeah, that's true. You did want to be real big, real tough, and real strong. And I think even then, my favorite character detail that you brought in at that session 0 is you did mention Gable was 7 feet tall, and that I was so enamored with that idea that I had to make sure that it appeared in like literally every fact that we brought up about the character.
But yeah, I don't think we've touched on things that we've gotten rid of, because I think anything that we haven't mentioned yet is not necessarily off the table.
Yeah, I mean, one of the things that I sort of brought up at the beginning of this stream is that like we're still laying the groundwork, and in many ways it feels like the game hasn't really started yet, because I'm still working through giving out all of the information that we generated in that session 0 and putting characters and locations and aspects of the setting in place so that, once we have all those dominoes set up, we can actually start knocking them over. So there's
say, like, the last session we did felt like the first session where we're like playing on equal terms.
Yeah, I mean, like there is definitely going to be in the next arc that we're going to record, there's going to be a lot more like independence of the first few arcs that we've done. I have put problems in front of you, and you have really no choice but to solve them. And the next arc that we do is you're going to be put in a place with opportunities, and you'll have motivations, and I'm going to see what you decide to do with those. But we're still, I think, even at this point, because not all of the information about the characters is out there, not all of your antagonists have been clearly defined and everything. There's still a lot that needs to be laid down. So like I can really start jumping into the plot and pushing you for plot things.
Mm.
It's interesting. Ree mentions in the chat that the end of episode 9 felt like the end of a pilot episode. And to me, in what we've done so far, if I were picturing Skyjacks as a pilot, the end of the pilot is episode 3. I originally wanted, because we dropped episode 1 and 2 on the same day. I originally wanted to do 1, 2, and 3, but the schedule and editing just really wouldn't allow for it. At the end of episode 3, that is when Jonnet's eye gets revealed. Like we get our first glimpse at really what magic is like in the setting beyond just making these big old ships float around. And like we just saw Travis turn into a rabbit. And then we see, you know, this kid, like Gable obviously has some stuff going on. But Jonnet of the crew feels like he's got the most normal stuff. Cause like Dref came out and said, I'm a necromancer. Travis turned into a bunny and Gable is 7 feet tall and has that magic eye thing going on for themselves. So like, you know, something there is up, but Jonnet feels like a happy, normal kid. And then it gets revealed that like, oh, he's got a third eye and it helps him like see the divine truth behind reality or something. So that felt like, damn, okay, that is dropping some stuff. But yeah, the end of episode 9 is like, I feel like if you're pitching Skyjacks as a series and you say, oh man, well, you really, when we get to episode 3, that's when things really start cooking. And I feel like that kind of is it, is like you get this huge character reveal about Gable. We learn that Gable is an angel and that raises so many questions and, you know, really makes us interested in it. So I'm super into that reveal and how that played out. And I think you were absolutely right. It feels like an important dramatic moment that kind of defines the beginning of this series. Let's see. We got this question from Twin Hits. Do you ever feel bits from campaign coming on? If so, how do you handle that to make sure that Skyjacks doesn't become too derivative?
What does it mean? What does it mean?
I've been thinking about this, and I think like they mean bits that sort of defined campaign, like the idea of the procedural debriefs, or maybe knocking over postcards as you leave an establishment, something like that. And you know, so far, I don't think, I feel like Star Wars is different enough as a setting from Skyjacks that like not a lot of those opportunities feel like they come up, but I don't necessarily feel like we would lean away from that or resist the temptation to indulge those bits. We really can't be derivative of campaign because, you know, 3 of the people who do this show were on that show. So
the people who, in my opinion, the majority of players on this show, they're going to be hyper aware of whatever overlap there would be.
Mm-hmm.
So like they're going to actively avoid bits that they did in other things because that's like the improviser's sort of whole deal.
Yeah, that's part of it. I mean, I don't know. Like, I definitely feel like callbacks. Like, it at some point in the Skyjacks universe, if you are chased by bounty hunters, there is a distinct possibility that we will spend some time naming those bounty hunters. Like,
okay, well, all right.
I'm not afraid of associations with the old campaign because like the people who did that are still a part of this show. And like, I don't know, I wouldn't look at another artist and say like, oh, Futurama is derivative of The Simpsons. It's like, no, the people who created that show also created the other show. So what you're noticing there is a stylistic preference at a certain point.
Yeah, that's a good point. Preference and style versus like repeating bits are two very different things.
We got a question from the chat from Names Equipped that I think is really interesting. Did people choose their Luminary cards before they made their characters? Just because I figure Travis having the changeling can't be a coincidence. It's not a coincidence in that Johnny O'Mara is a fan of the Decemberists, and when he saw that there were stats for a changeling in Genesis, he was like, oh, can I be a changeling, because it's like Hazards of Love. So like I didn't have people draw Luminary cards because actually I didn't write the rules for divinations for the Luminaries until after our session 0. Like Sphere could have been a wildly different place based on that session 0. And we did record it. I can't wait to release that material, but it would be like a year and a half into the show just because of all of the things that we laid out that we wanted to do in that show. So like, yeah, I did not have people draw luminaries that would be like their luminary or whatnot, sort of the way we did in A Woman with Hollow Eyes with the Sooth deck. Though, now that I know more about the world, I would consider that. Like if I were to start a new game in the Sphere and Skyjacks universe, I would probably be like, oh, would you like to pull a Luminary and have that sort of be a strongly associated card with your character, or pick a Luminary for that. Anyway, Lena asked us, are there plans to ever publish Sphere as a Genesis setting? And I will say,
plans to publish it?
Yeah. So Fantasy Flight is one of the harder to approach companies in the tabletop gaming space. Like I don't have many contacts there, and I wouldn't know how to go about licensing from them. So Genesis, we picked it because it was a versatile system. Our players were familiar with it, and it would be familiar to our audience. That might not ultimately be, what we do with Skyjacks as a setting. But there are a lot of decisions that haven't been made yet. One thing that I do consider as we, make decisions like that moving forward is that Illimat is the property of Together Studios. So we would probably, like if we publish things, it will probably be somehow in association with Together Studios, just because their IP is part of the product. Lena also asked, will there be flashback episodes at some point? And my answer to that is yes. Like we're obviously constantly referring to events that took place in the past, and like we will be examining those as narrative at some point. But I want to give the cast a little bit more time to find their feet as their characters and define their points of view and whatnot before I put them into the past. Just so things feel like internally consistent, and like we can call back to the future in certain ways and whatnot. But yeah, we're definitely going to do flashbacks. Paul asked us, do you warm up or cool down? I love that. In a way we do, because we do, we do the Dear Uhurus before the show, which as Liz has mentioned, they're just improv. So
Can I take a moment to like, when it comes to Diruhurus, and I think James has noticed this, when it comes to people's personal like NPCs that they make, I'm so sorry if we ruin them. So sorry. It's a hazard, and I'm so sorry, but no, it yeah it.
So
If you're very
this is
yeah.
great because it ties into the last question that we have that we got in advance. I think I'll take one or two, maybe three more from chat before we wrap up this stream. But the question that we got from Rourke is, what is best for you in terms of Diruhurus / crew applications? Um, and as Liz has pointed out, I feel like a bunch of the crew applicants that I have received feel like very personal OCs that I get from people. And like, it's like, oh, this is clearly a character that somebody would play if they brought to the Skyjacks setting. And I think all of us as performers don't want to hurt people by making a wreck of those characters.
Yeah, and it's not to say like I I think like the NPCs are the interviews. I think we're honestly better at them in a certain way because like it gets James to play, and James, we can trust him with those characters. But if it's someone who you want to be respected and treated as an equal, that might not be what you'll get with us.
Yeah, yeah.
Unfortunately.
I mean, so far the only NPC applicant that has made it past that phase is Slam, who will in the future appear on more episodes. It's just we are so far ahead at this point that the episodes that he is featured in are ways off still. And I think we chose that character to keep going because he has a very silly voice and like a very clear bit.
Johnny, and that's why he's still around.
Yeah.
Did you ruin him?
So I mean, I think a thing that that I am definitely going to be trying in the next like batch of Dear Uhurus that we do is I am going to pick some of those OC characters and I am going to try and have them play the straight man. Most of the OCs or the submissions that we've got for Dear Uhuru NPCs have been bits. They are people, that are there to baffle and confuse the crew of the Uhuru. And I want to give an opportunity for my performers to, subject me to hell and have people who are like just earnestly looking to get on a pirate crew and have to deal with Johnny O'Mara.
Yeah. And like, I don't want to discourage people from sending in their OCs because a lot of times, like, really wonderful characters have gotten sent in. And it's sort of the same thing for the Dear Hurus. Most of the time, if it's just a straightforward question, that's wonderful, perfect. But if it's a reference to something, we're going to spend like 5 minutes trying to figure out what it is. And most of the time, wrong because we are not very online. We are very old.
Yeah. In terms of like Dear Uhuru letters, sending the crew like actual question of advice, like I think is great because, we have a bunch of cartoon characters with really absurd perspectives on the world that like it will produce a lot of fun and entertaining content if you send in like something that's kind of an earnest question to have these characters answer it from a completely wild perspective. But the bits are good too. It's just important that for us to get variations in that, so that we feel like we're not always doing the same joke when we do the Dear Uhurus.
I trust James to help us get there or to edit us if we are like being very, very like off topic or not doing the thing. So no one feel afraid about submitting the thing there was one to submit, but just keep that in mind.
Yeah. So with that, I will ask the chat now if you have any questions based on the conversation that Liz and I have had so far, and especially questions that Liz can participate in, please.
Or James participate in. I mean,
well, yeah, I don't want to dominate everything. You're here. I don't want to waste your time. I have since I met Liz, she's a person who I've worried about wasting her time. So
which is most of the time that I spend with you, I'm trying to get you to waste it.
Well, I mean, when we first met on Sorry We're Late, my perception of you very quickly based on how much work you were doing is oh, this person is extremely professional, so I have to be extremely professional back.
Yeah, well.
Especially because
and yet you won't
Johnny was in there.
To my party.
Oh. So yeah, Liz invited me to a Wrestle Boys party for us to watch the Royal Rumble, and I had to work and I could not go, and I feel bad about it. Liz constantly sends me these olive branches of friendship where she tries to invite me to be a closer friend, and there are just circumstances that make it so that I can't attend them, and it bums me out.
Everyone's busy. I understand. We are all very, very busy young professionals. But the more opportunities we have to meet that neither of us are necessarily on the clock for, it's probably the better. How many crushes on Travis?
We're there's an upcoming scene that will sort of explore that. One of the things that I think surprised the crew when I was recording is Travis is given a job on the ship, and I really don't explain how he got it. And I think I need to record a scene of everybody just playing some NPCs. So we might investigate people's feelings about Travis from an outsider perspective very soon, which could be a lot of fun. Another question that we got is what is this going to be gayer than Star Wars campaign? Is Skyjacks going to be gayer than Star Wars campaign? And it's hard to guarantee. One of the things is when you remove JPC's ability to be Trist Valentine, who just introduces sex to literally every conversation that he has. You're taking less shots, so fewer of those shots are going to be gay at the end of the day. But I will say, I don't think Jonnet or Travis have defined sexualities. I know a little bit about what's going on with Gable, and definitionally Gable being a gender fluid, non-binary, agendered person. That a relationship of any kind involving Gable is going to be queer in some way, no matter what. And I think Liz doesn't even know at this point that there is a major queer aspect that drives Gable's narrative that I think is interesting to investigate and important. I have sort of an idea, but not the whole. I know some stuff. I know some stuff that I'm going to be confronting you with, and you don't need to worry about it. It's not going to take any effort from you to make it a queer narrative. It's just there, and it's built into that character's history, and it's going to be super cool to watch it pay off. So that is going to be a thing that drives the show in a particular way. So when we compare campaign, Trist, even though he was a pansexual character, Trist's major romantic relationship was with Ava. So it's a bisexual relationship, but it's still, heterosexual. So I think queer narratives are going to be more important, even if we don't have a character who's super hypersexual driving a lot of the discussion of sex and romance on the show, if that makes sense. Oh yeah, and then there's Lenik Gilo of the Minoc, who was at least demisexual, if not asexual, as a character, which super queer narrative there, super cool queer narrative there. But stepping back from that, other questions that we got. I'm trying to go back and find ones that are not bits. Names Equipped says, dumb setting question. Could you have clothing made of featherweave? And the dumb answer for that is yes. I believe Jonnet goes on the enemy ship with a bandana or handkerchief made of featherweave. Featherweave is just tremendously expensive, which is the reason that you wouldn't see clothing made out of it, or clothing made out of it would be pretty rare. But that doesn't mean it doesn't happen. So yeah, you definitely could. Anything about Evil Campaign, Skyjacks edition? I think we haven't even introduced characters that could be part of an evil party yet. So I think the show needs to be on a bit longer before we could do something like that.
I think we're getting there though.
Yeah, we're definitely coming up on some stuff. I feel like the next arc is going to introduce some stuff, but the one after that, or maybe the one after that, is when we'll start seeing characters who might be part of an evil campaign. And I have literally no idea who could play those characters. So that's an interesting problem that I have for me. Is there or could there be a convention of podcasts and RPGs in Chicago, since there's a huge density of podcasters and improvisers in that city? Probably, but I can't organize that. So
there is like a PodCon.
I thought I thought that convention. The impression that I got from PodCon is that it moves to different cities.
No, not PodCon. No. The name.
Oh,
like we did. What was we did the tiny house hunters at it.
Yeah. I can't even remember what that was.
Yeah, it like there is a podcast convention that's sort of like all year that is run by something called Chicago Improv Productions.
Mm-hmm.
I couldn't tell you what or like how good it is, how involved they are, or how interested they are in things, but that might be more of a presence over the next couple of years.
Yeah. Boy, it would be cool. It would be cool to participate in some Chicago local convention. Like I know there's the Nerd Comedy Festival, which incorporates a lot of podcasts and definitely has themes around us. It's just they've never asked us to do anything with them, and I'm usually so busy trying to run the network logistically and plan for gaming conventions that are more of a known quantity that I haven't taken the time to seek them out. But I would love to do more live shows, and that's definitely something that we have talked about. We're already sort of planning for Gen Con this year. I have big aspirations about what we're going to do for Gen Con. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's probably the better bet.
And I got from Fudgerman, is there going to be a character that James plays like Kat played Lynn? And the answer to that is I don't know. It doesn't seem super likely at this point, simply because there's a lot of characters on that ship. Like I have a lot of NPCs to play. So in a way, Nodos is kind of like that. Spit is kind of like that.
Spit is a menace.
Yeah, Spit is great. He's an easy voice to do with a immediately terrible personality to
The
go
fact that
with it.
James chose him to read Dear Hurus was a choice against like all of us. It was a offensive action against all of our enjoyment.
It was a preemptive strike. Like literally almost every time I launch into reading a letter as Spit, somebody at the table will say, "Oh God."
We forget, and
Yeah.
then he's there, and it's can't go away. Ugh.
Could you say a bit about the racial demographics of the main crew invested in the anti-colonial narrative? So I don't have defined races for the NPCs of the crew. As far as characters who are on the ship, like as far as like the main cast that people are playing, like Jonnet is black. That they're, it means a different thing in the Skyjacks universe just because it is not a world like our world. But like if we were to say that things were analogous, Jonnet is a black kid. Nobody is playing a cross racial performance. And other things about like race in terms of the Skyjack universe have not been defined on the show yet. So I haven't defined them about characters. Like I mentioned earlier, I have hired some freelancers to contribute like cities, tribes, and towns that exist in the Skyjacks universe. Because right now, Sphere is a big empty map. So far, we have Wolf's Tooth, and that is the only place in the world. And we're starting there. Wolf's Tooth is, oh yeah, Captain Oromar Vale is also black. That is true. We're starting in Wolf's Tooth, which is a very small place that maybe only 100 people are there. And like Skyjacks pass through there. Skyjacks are like the most diverse group of people that you can imagine because they recruit from all of the various places that they see. But like Wolf's Tooth is just like a small sliver of things. And the reason that I have it that way is I've hired freelancers and other people who are not me to write up these places that are inspired by different cultures on our world to become a part of the Sphere world. And I, as a white guy, I don't feel like I am the best person to write about like, okay, what would a Chinese culture be like if it were in the Skyjacks universe? Because I don't know anything about that. So rather than write things and then hire a sensitivity consultant to like assess what I've written, I have instead gone to people that I would hire as sensitivity consultants and said, could you produce this aspect of the setting for me? And I will incorporate that into what we've done. There'll be places that our cast can actually visit in their adventures, and people from these places will appear, whether we're visiting that area or not. And so far, I've gotten 2 of those. One from James Mendez Hodes, who you'll recognize as the sensitivity consultant who worked with us on our Kagamatsu episodes, and also the designer of the Thousand Arrows role-playing system. And the other from Whitney Beltran, who's known to people as Strix also. She's one of the co-designers of Bluebeard's Bride, and she's just a tremendously, phenomenally talented writer. And they've both created like setting seeds. And there are a couple other freelancers that I am working with to flesh out the world a little bit and make it feel more diverse. And you will start seeing more explicit and named diversity in terms of the people who are on our crew and the people that we encounter in the world once I have information that has come from, creative people who are not me to incorporate. So that said, like, how does it tie into the anti-colonial narrative? One of the things that I think is already very clear from the little preview episodes that I put together of that Skyjack who was monologuing about different things in the world is that the colonialism in this world is a corporate-driven colonialism. There are not nations in this world. Like the nations, as we understand the idea, did exist, but don't exist anymore because they fell apart. And the symptom of those nations, the like kind of gross specter of colonialism that still exists in the setting, is the Red Feather Syndicate. They control all of the transportation in the world of Sphere, or like most of it. They decide who flying in the air is a pirate and who is, just a regular person trying to make a wage. So in the anti-colonialist narrative, we're fighting capitalism and colonialism at the same time. They're both been sort of boiled down into the same enemy. And like it's, at the top levels, the Red Feather Syndicate is like kind of cartoonishly evil, but a lot of the people who work for that organization are not cartoonishly evil. It's like people who are looking for a job, and the job that they decided, or the job that they could get, was to be a hand on a Red Feather ship. So it's complicated and uncomplicated at the same time. And the last question that I think I can answer also came from Fudgerman, and it is, I really liked the opening crawl in Star Wars campaign. Do you plan on doing anything like that to recap what's going on in Skyjacks? And I wasn't, is what I'll say. The reason that we included the crawl in campaign is it is part of the form of doing a Star Wars narrative. And we're not doing Star Wars anymore.
What?
Yeah. So we did talk about for a short period of time to be like, sort of the end of Skyjacks, Han Solo would land on the planet and Luke Skywalker would walk out with him, and you'd realize it was Star Wars the whole time, Star Wars all the way down. But I think we're starting to trend away from that. And we'll see if the original plan still holds true, but I don't think there might be room for it. We will, sort of the way we did in campaign, we are going to, at the start of new arcs, we are going to make the performers reintroduce their characters. We'll get physical descriptions of them again, and there could be kind of a narrator who sums up the story thus far attached to those episodes, just so we can have new jumping on points for people. But it's definitely not going to be an episode by episode crawl like we have in the past. So with that, I want to first thank Liz Anderson for joining me on this.
James.
Liz, thank you so much for not only taking your time tonight to answer questions, but for being a part of the show at all. It's extremely exciting to work with you, and it means a lot to me that you're doing this with us. So thank you.
And thank you to James for all the kind words, for sure. I'm never going to let him forget it. And then also just it's a real pleasure to be part of a project that is, for one, this big and so beloved, and has been so accepted in a certain way, especially coming off of what was already a pretty popular property. And I think I personally was like, it was very intimidating, but the community has been very, very welcoming. And I just want to thank everyone for all of that. It's been a very good experience.
I will say, behind the scenes, one of the big things that has been a driver for this campaign has been anxiety, because campaign was a huge and truly beloved thing, and everybody who listened to the show, was not shy about letting us know how much they love it and how nervous they were about it being replaced. And we were nervous about that too, because everybody who worked on campaign, like, we really liked working on that show, and Liz, listened to that show and enjoyed it. And I would certainly listen to episodes when they posted and enjoy them. So I was a big fan of the original campaign, and I was worried about, what we could possibly do to follow that act. And it feels like a huge relief to see the ways in which people have embraced what we're doing. So
Yeah, it's been very, very kind, and like I've never felt like I'm not part of the community. I'm grateful for all of that.
Yeah. So with that, I think that segues perfectly. And thank you, all of you, for watching this stream and for your questions and for just generally listening to the show. It's so much better doing this, having all of you out there. We love seeing the fan art that has poured in from this, the fan fiction that has poured in from this. It excites me so much to just like over the past week or so, see all of the amazing pictures of Gable that we have based on that character.
Yo, we recorded that in October, and I knew from the get-go, I was just like, just give me the pics, give them.
Yeah, it's delicious. I mean, and we have this canon Gable. We will have official art for the other characters once the rest of the art comes in. That's when I'll be posting things to the website and sharing things more on social media. So the Gable that we see over here is just a preview, and we'll be unveiling that in truth. Like, there's actually more to this image than what you see.
It's just what.
Yeah. So you'll get to see the complete vision for Gable once the rest of the art is done. And I'm hoping that happens in February. We're working with a fantastically talented artist, Hannah Christensen, and she is working very diligently on the other characters. But, as you can see in this drawing, there is a lot of detail, and Hannah does really great work, so that it also takes time. But again, thanks everybody so much. I am going to stop the stream now. Please, if you can, support A Woman with Hollow Eyes. It's on Kickstarter now. Sorry we couldn't do A Woman with Hollow Eyes stream, but I'm glad that we got to have this conversation with you. And stop.